Folks, earlier I spoke about all this with Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Please take a listen. All right, we welcome back to the show Senator Ted Cruz of the great state of Texas. Senator Cruz, thank you, sir. Appreciate your coming back on.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate your having me.
Lots to talk about. Let's start with the Joe Biden video, which itself is somewhat curious yesterday. He says he wants to finish the job. What do you think about that? What do you think about finishing the job? And what do you think about what he had to say? He didn't mention any of his own achievements or accomplishments.
Well, first of all, it speaks volumes that he had to do a pre-recorded video with a teleprompter, that he didn't go do an event, that he didn't have a crowd, that he wasn't able to actually stand up and speak. And I think it really conveys the incredible diminishment of mental capacity we've seen from Joe Biden, that they had to essentially have him read a script in a very controlled and edited manner. You know, the slogan he's putting out of finishing the job is a little remarkable, because the job that he's done so far, that's a little bit like a mafia hitman saying his slogan is finish the job. You know, Joe Biden has managed to kill the economy. He's managed to wreak utter havoc and disaster. We've got inflation out of control. We've got gas prices out of control. We have crime skyrocketing across the country. We have the worst illegal immigration in the history of our nation. We had 100,000 people die last year of drug overdoses, the majority of which came from Chinese fentanyl flooding across the southern border. We have a relentless assault on our constitutional rights, on free speech, on religious liberty, on the Second Amendment. And as bad as all of that is, the foreign policy and national security policy is even worse. We have the first major land war in Europe since World War II under Joe Biden's watch. Every enemy of America is stronger today under Joe Biden's watch, from Russia to China to Iran to North Korea. There's a reason in his entire video. What does he talk about? He talks about Donald Trump. He hates Trump. He hates Trump. We got that. But he can't talk about a damn thing he's done in office, because every single thing this president and this vice president have touched, they have done damage and they've hurt the American consumers.
Can I come back to that point? You mentioned this vice president. Look, personally, I don't wish Joe Biden or anybody else any ill. Absolutely not. I'm sure you don't either. But there are a lot of medical experts who believe that President Biden will not be capable of finishing a second term if he's elected. Okay. Again, I wish him no ill will. I'm just saying this is what a lot of experts are saying. Now, my point is, what I ask you about, wouldn't the Republicans, whoever the nominee is or the party in general, wouldn't they want to talk about Kamala Harris, the vice president, who could well become the president if there were a second term? What her record is as vice president, but also, Senator Cruz, what her record was as a far-left senator from California. I mean, wouldn't the GOP want to open that door?
I think that absolutely is going to be a major issue for discussion in this election. Listen, Joe Biden is 142 years old. In a very real sense, this election, the Democrats are suggesting Kamala Harris for president. You're right, there's a real possibility if Biden were to win, and I don't think he's going to, but if he were to win, there's a very real possibility that Kamala Harris becomes the president. And can you imagine Kamala sitting across from Putin? Can you imagine Kamala sitting across from Xi? And when they stand up and bully America, which is what they do, can you imagine her just cackling ineffectively and weirdly and creepily? It really is amazing. Joe Biden's popularity is in the low 40s. Kamala Harris's popularity is in the 30s. Even Democrats are embarrassed of the job she's done. And there's a reason why the Biden White House stuck Kamala in a bunch of those images with Biden. They're trying to rehabilitate all of the damage she's done to herself, but I don't think that's going to work.
Well, and I don't think people know how far left her record was as a senator from California. I mean, I'm not sure people know much about her in general, and I think that subject should be illuminated as part of the campaign, is all I'm saying.
Well, absolutely, and she was both extreme left and extremely ineffective. So I served with Kamala. We were both on the Senate Judiciary Committee together. On every issue, 100% of the time, she could be counted on to embrace the radical left position on issues of the judiciary and law and order. She would defend abolishing the police. She'd defend George Soros prosecutors who let murderers and violent criminals go. On every issue, when it comes to the First Amendment, she would advocate taking away your right to free speech. She would advocate taking away your religious liberty. She absolutely and enthusiastically would advocate taking away your Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. Now, the one good side, oddly enough, is she was very ineffective at doing all of that. She'd give a speech, but in the time she served in the Senate, I don't know a single thing she passed. I've passed 97 different pieces of legislation into law. I don't know that Kamala has passed any, and there's a reason right now the Biden White House basically keeps her in a basement locked up, because when they send her to do something, she messes it up.
All right, let me switch gears just a second. As you know, Title 42 is going to run out, I don't know,
Yep.
they say early May, couple of weeks. What is the plan? I mean, a lot of experts are saying as many as 2 million more people
Yep.
will come across the border without Title 42, which for all of its imperfections worked pretty well. I mean, is it going to be redefined? We're not getting any help from Mexican President AMLO. The cartels are still in charge of the border. I don't see anything but bad news coming out of that. What's going to happen here, and what should happen here, Senator Cruz?
Look, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, they want open borders. There have been over 6 million people who've crossed illegally under Joe Biden. That is by design. That's the outcome they want. They want this politically because they look at those 6 million people coming illegally and they see future Democrat voters. Their objective in the next 2 years, they want another 6 million. They want another 10 million to come illegally. They are trying to fundamentally change this country. And it's amazing. You know, we just had a couple of weeks ago Alejandro Mayorkas testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee. I asked him how many migrants in the past year died trying to cross illegally into this country. He said, I don't know. He had no idea. He didn't care. It didn't matter to him. The number's 853. I've seen those dead bodies. I've seen pregnant women and toddlers and elderly people abandoned to die in the Texas heat on farms and ranches in South Texas. I've been out on the Rio Grande River and I've seen a dead body floating there from someone who tried to cross illegally and drowned. And this administration doesn't care. I've seen the women who were sexually assaulted by the human traffickers. I've seen the little boys and little girls physically assaulted, sexually assaulted by the thousands. And this administration doesn't care. And I'll tell you how bad it is, Larry. In that hearing, I put up a poster board of colored wristbands, and I asked Secretary Mayorkas, I said, what are these colored wristbands? And he said, I don't know, I have no idea. And I got to admit, that answer shocked me. I did not expect that. I told him, I said, Mr. Secretary, you've just told the American people you are utterly incompetent at your job, and you don't care enough to even pretend. Those wristbands, as you know, Larry, just about every illegal immigrant who crosses the border wears those colored wristbands. If you stand on the banks of the Rio Grande River, you see hundreds, you see thousands of them. They're color-coded for how many thousands of dollars they owe the cartels. And what happens, they get here, the Biden administration transports them to any city in America they want to go, and thousands upon thousands of the teenage boys go to work for the cartels in criminal activity to pay off the debts, and thousands upon thousands of the teenage girls get trapped in sex slavery. This is modern-day slavery that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have ushered in, and not only do they not intend to stop it, their only plan is to make it faster and more efficient and even bigger.
So obviously you want to retire Joe Biden. I get that, and
Yes.
Kamala Harris. In all honesty, just in the last moment, sir, which of the Republican candidates do you think has the best chance of defeating Joe Biden? Honest answer. Ted Cruz,
Well,
honest answer.
Listen, Larry, I think we've got a whole primary that's playing out. I'm staying out of it. I think the top two candidates are clearly Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. I think the two of them are going to beat the living daylights out of each other. Both are friends of mine. Both are people I respect deeply. And what I very much hope is that when that primary is over and we have a Republican nominee, I hope we all unify together and say what matters now is winning in November and ending this long national nightmare. And so I hope, as vigorous as it gets, and they're both going to say nasty stuff, that when the primary is over, they put their swords down and hug it out, and we go forward to win in November.
All right, Senator Cruz. I tried. I just tried. I tried. Anyway.